putting their queer storybooks in our library. Who told these queer people they could do all that? It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me.
It's the end of the world as we know it.
And I feel fine. Hello, Champagne Nightmares. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. I don't know how you found me, but hit that subscribe button. Stick around for all the spooky content. My name is Janessa J. Champagne, and I am North Dakota's trash queen of glam, geek, and gore. And for today's horror video, we're going to be talking about my favorite end-of-the-world, post-apocalyptic, dystopian narratives. We've got books and movies and TV shows, all of those end-of-the-world, let's party in the dystopia kind of stories. I have always loved these kinds of stories, and I have some really good ones to share with you today. So if you're excited to get into these end-of-the-world narratives, then stick around, because we're getting into it right now. So in terms of what I mean by end-of-the-world narratives, we're talking about post-apocalyptic, dystopian society kind of things. Now, some of these overlap with other genres as well. There are some things that really kind of blur the lines between when is it, a zombie outbreak and when is that sort of a post-apocalyptic. So for me, it's all about stories that really focus on the breakdown of society and how people interact with each other. So in some ways, I think that The Walking Dead started off as a zombie story. So that was really very much a zombie TV show. But as it continued on, it becomes a post-apocalyptic, dystopian kind of story because it becomes less about the zombies. Once you figure out how the walkers work and how you can overcome them and the types of threats and how to build up defenses and all that kind of stuff, it's less about that, and you realize what the real threat is. Spoiler alert, it's other fucking people. Always. And so dystopian end-of-the-world narratives, I love the way they focus on what really happens when society ends. What is the true nature of humanity? And a lot of it is pretty fucking gross. So we're going to talk about things that kind of overlap with several other kinds of horror, sci-fi kind of genres as well. So just be prepared. There's going to be a little bit of nuclear meltdown. There's going to be a little zombie. There might be a little alien. There's a little bit of everything for everyone. So I hope you're excited. Let's get into my number 10 pick. Number 10 is a movie, and there's a whole franchise built around this. Some of it's better than others. The most recent one, I'm sorry nerds, it was unwatchable. But if you want a really good end-of-the-world kind of dystopian narrative that has some really interesting things, check out The Matrix. I'm sure so many people have seen The Matrix. This is not a surprise. What I really love about it, and what I've been discovering about it more recently, is the more we know about the life path and trajectory of the directors, the Wachowski sisters, who when they directed it were not the Wachowski sisters. I love that there's so much from The Matrix that like Ben Shapiro's crowd and all of those awful conservative twat waffles have like red pill, blue pill bullshit. But The Matrix itself is like this crazy trans allegory. I absolutely love it. So all these people who are mad about Bud Light because they sent a custom can to Dylan Mulvaney, they're talking all this red pill, blue pill. And here The Matrix is as this like perfect allegory for trans identity and having to exist in a society that, you can either choose to just play along and not be who you really are and just kind of pretend, but everything is fake, Or you can go out into the real world, which is hard and tough and people attack you. There's so much in it that is such a great metaphor for what trans people experience. And of course, people are like, oh, how did they make such a great, like, trans allegory? And then cut to years later when both of the Wachowskis have come out as trans women and have shared that part of their lives with us and that part of their journey. And it really gives so much more depth and meaning to The Matrix. So that's a good place to start, and that gives you a sense of where we're going on this little list. In the number 9 spot, now I do have a soft spot in my heart for The Handmaid's Tale, the book. I've read The Handmaid's Tale, the book. I haven't watched the series yet because I had waited for some of it to come out and I didn't have Hulu for a long time. During the Donald Trump presidency and now after with the Supreme Cult and all of this shit, it feels a little too close to potential real life. I can't watch it. My anxiety like flares up. And so I'm like, I'll go back to it sometime when I feel stronger. I do love The Handmaid's Tale, but Margaret Atwood also has The Year of the Flood. I think that might be what they called the series. That's also the name of the second book. Or maybe Mad Adam. I don't know. It's a trilogy of books. And the first one is Orex and CRA. And I really love Orex and CRA because it's this kind of post-apocalyptic book that talks to you about how society breaks down. And it's these two people, Orex and CRA, and there's this other guy who's kind of a hacker and kind of involved with things, and he causes this kind of sociopath who's kind of in their orbit, causes the downfall of society. And he does it through this drug that's all about bliss and pleasure and orgasms. And it's all about how the internet and social media and just really the way that we organize our lives now, so many times we just put pleasure above everything else. And so basically what he does is he contaminates this, I think they call it Bliss X or Bliss Plus, and it's this drug that people use when they're trying to get off and get sexy, and it eventually infects the whole population, and it causes this mass destruction when he kicks off this event. So there's more to it, and there's computer hacking, and there's like definitely some dark stuff with Oryx. There's stuff with her as a child being trafficked, and it's very dark. It's very much in that vein of Margaret Atwood, but I loved Orex and CRA. I need to go back to it, and I don't think I've ever read the third book, so I definitely need to check in, because that first book, you see before the downfall, and then you see after, and you find out how it gets that way, and so it's really interesting to see these people and how they interact and how the world falls apart, and it's because of our own choices and who's left and how the survivors interact. It's so good. Oryx and CRA by Margaret Atwood. In the number 8 spot, let's get some aliens in the mix. I love V. I love the original V from the 80s, the 2 miniseries, as well as the short-lived series. The series got a little bizarre, a little bit weird, but especially that original miniseries, and I loved the reboot that came out in the early 2000s. And what I loved about the 1980s V is that it really was this kind of revisiting of Nazi Germany. And it's so clearly done. In some ways, it's almost too on the nose. But for people who don't understand what happened during the Holocaust and how everyday citizens became wrapped up in this and not stopping it and not getting involved, V really kind of presents this sort of situation where these alien invaders come and they promise that everything's going to be better, everything's going to be great, and they're really kind of rounding people up, and people disappear in the night, and they're making all these promises about, oh, we know your life is hard, what if we could cure all disease, what if we could take care of your energy problems? And people are like, oh, well, maybe I won't look too closely over there with what's happening with my neighbor, because it's not happening to me, and they're promising all these great things, and it turns out that they're just exploiting you. And even beyond like the alien invaders themselves, the way that humanity reacts, and some people who sort of align themselves with the visitors, that to me is such a great allegory, and it really gets brought out in the reboot of people who are collaborators, of people who are part of it, because that's something that I have come to just accept, but I will never understand. There are always marginalized people who are more than happy to be complicit with the people who are oppressing them. It makes no sense, but that's like Candace Owens. I live in North Dakota, and let me tell you, anytime any sort of Black Lives Matter thing kicks off, you've got a bunch of white women from the Midwest reposting fucking Candace Owens clips. Talking about, well, if that thug hadn't been walking around, if he'd have just complied, all this kind of bullshit. It's bullshit, and it's somebody who is part of an oppressed group, and for whatever reason, whatever benefits that they get, they are willing to align themselves with the oppressor. You know, Milo Yiannopoulos did it to gay folks. Blair White is doing it to trans folks. There's always going to be people who, for whatever reason that I will never understand, are willing to be complicit with their oppressors. And V really cuts into that. And the reboot especially is really good at that. Of like looking at people who are collaborators and people who are willing to sell out others for their own personal gain. And it's disgusting and horrifying and so completely, truly human. In the number 7 spot, I haven't watched the movies. I heard the movies are great, Gregory Peck, all that kind of stuff. But the book for On the Beach, there's a lot of sort of nuclear blast, end of the world fiction out there. You know, Oppenheimer just came out not too long ago. After the nuclear bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there became this sort of nuclear panic in the 50s. People saw the destruction that was possible. And there became this sort of nuclear fear of what could happen, of what could be turned on us at any moment with very little, if any, warning. And so there's a lot of fiction from the 50s that really brings out that kind of nuclear panic. And one of them is On the Beach. And I love it. The reason why I love it is because I think of it as the politest apocalypse in the world. And what I mean by that is so many of these other apocalyptic stories really are rough and dirty. It's Mad Max, it's the Book of Eli, it's all this kind of like rage, mutant fighters and bikers and fighting for resources. And On the Beach is very different. And basically it's set in Australia. And what it is that a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, there was this big nuclear war, and every place else on the planet is wiped out. So the United States, USSR, they kind of got into a thing, and soon everybody else is joining in. And basically the rest of the world is completely dead as far as anybody knows. And because of where Australia is located, they've been shielded. And so now, because of currents and wind patterns, they realize that this cloud of cobalt radiation is going to be coming and kill everyone in Australia. So this is really an extinction story. And what I love about this is that it really is the politest apocalypse in the world. And so basically, as everybody is in Australia, they're just minding their own business. People are still going to work. I mean, if you want to talk about a capitalist narrative, it's the end of the world, the rest of the world has been destroyed, and everybody knows that they're going to die, but they keep going to work until they're just too sick to work. And so they just keep going, and there's this woman named Moira who is kind of like shiftless, and she's a little bit of an anarchist, and she's just kind of bratty, and she just is like, why should I do anything? Who cares? We're all gonna die. And she meets this like admiral in the Navy, and they have a little romance. And he, like, turns her around, and she's like, I'm going to be a good woman from now on. And she goes and enrolls in a secretarial course during the apocalypse. So she's still, like, going to school. She's like, I'm going to learn to be a secretary for the next 2 months that we're alive. And, like, it's really dark. Like, the government is sending out basically these suicide kits so that people can take their own lives when they get too sick if they don't want to just die from the radiation. They're giving them the option to commit suicide. And basically, everybody's just going about their business. Nobody's fighting, nobody's looting, nobody's raiding. It's just one time a character will go downtown, they'll be like, oh, the hardware store is not open anymore. I guess Mrs. Johansson is too sick to come to work. I guess she died. And just like, nobody's worried about it. And so there's this whole mission where they go off to see if maybe there's hope. They heard that maybe the radiation was breaking down faster than they expected. And so they thought, well, maybe it'll be okay. And then they go on this mission and they find out, no, everything really is dead. And so then they just prepare for the end. And that's what the book is just them preparing for the end. And Moira becomes a good woman. And then she wanted to be on, so the admiral is going to go and like sink the submarine, and that's how he's going to die, and she wanted to go with him, but he was like, that's against the rules. And it's like, everybody's so fucking polite. It's so bizarre. If you've seen other end of the world narratives, you should read On the Beach just to be like, what the fuck do you think the end of the world is going to look like? It's bizarre, but I love it. There's a lot of good themes in it, too. It is kind of a classic, but it really is interesting to see that version of the post-apocalypse. May the odds be ever in your favor. The Hunger Games. Yes, The Hunger Games absolutely is an end-of-the-world narrative. It's a dystopian society. So maybe not an end of the world, but it's certainly post some sort of apocalypse, some sort of change in society to this dystopia that we see before us. And it's all about economics, baby! The Hunger Games is all about the growing stratification that we see in our culture between rich and poor. You know, the fact that, like, billionaires will just build penis rockets to space and, like, swim Pringles cans down to the Titanic instead of just getting some fucking therapy. Like, that's what this is all happening. That's what this is leading to. That's what caused that sort of eruption, that revolution in Panem that leads to then later on the Hunger Games. It's all of this unrest, and we see that stratification when you look at the districts where Katniss, you know, only eats because Peeta throws her the bread. Meanwhile, in the capital, at that party in the second book, they're just like shoving it in, and they drink something to make themselves throw up so they can eat more. That's all about rich versus poor. It's all economics. And that's the idea of may the odds be ever in your favor. That's really about the way that our culture treats rags to riches, the good minority, all those kind of stories that we have to try to convince people that, no, the system is fair. The system is fine. Look at this person. Look at this person who was raised in the ghetto. They love to bring people who were raised in the ghetto. And then they, like, made $1 million because they played basketball. And it's like, but that doesn't address systemic economic division and the way that it gets wider and wider and wider and wider. And the fact that, I mean, look at the kinds of choices that we're making. In North Dakota, we voted against, and I'm saying we, I fucking didn't. I didn't vote for any of those Republican twats that voted for this. We, North Dakota, voted not to extend a free lunch program to school children because some people who didn't need it would also get food. So fuck them hungry kids, fuck the poor kids, because we wouldn't want to feed somebody who could feed themselves. But then in that same session, days later, all of the lawmakers voted to raise their own daily meal allowance by almost $40. So they're like, fuck you kids, how are you gonna have lunch if I need to have lunch? Let's just pay for my lunch. And that sort of division, that's what the Hunger Games is all about. It's all about that division between rich and poor, and it takes it to this extreme place. And the way that people are willing to volunteer for something like the Hunger Games, because if you win, you get riches and food for life, and you can take care of your family and all that kind of shit. And the way that they get you to enter even more, because then, oh, we'll give you extra food allowance if you put your name in more times. And so it just really is about this economic disparity, and it's really ugly. And if you don't see that in our society now, go back and revisit those books and look at the kinds of stories that are coming out in our world today. It's bizarre. I love it. The Hunger Games, the books are really good. I think the movies are really good, but I think there's a lot more in the books. That's always the case. I always think the books are just as good, if not better. So definitely check out. But that story on both sides is so good. And I love Effie Trinket. Effie Trinket is somebody who is raised in privilege and is just unaware of it, and really has to have that experience with Katniss and Peeta, and really, like, coming to have some empathy for people from that other position. She's not bad because she has all that privilege. She just has it, and so it makes her kind of stupid. And so I love it. The Hunger Games will always be a favorite. In the number 5 spot is the movie Children of Men. Now, I don't know this one as well. I don't know if this was also a book. A lot of movies obviously are adapted from books. I've only ever seen the movie, so if there is a book, there might be more to it. I should look into that. But basically, it sets up this weird kind of dystopian society where people have just stopped giving birth. And so people are getting older and older and older, and there's no babies born. And so it almost becomes this weird celebrity. There's a news report early on in the movie where the world's youngest person either commits suicide or gets killed in an accident. And like it was clear that because they were the youngest, they were like the last birth. It was too much for them, and it was like a child celebrity, and they like self-destructed, either died in an accident or killed themselves or whatever it was. But then it becomes, now this person is the youngest person on the planet, and it becomes this obsession with like youth and why can't people have babies. Well, then there's a woman who's pregnant, which you would think would be a cause for celebration, and instead she is hunted by people who want to control this. So people who want to find out why it's happening, people who want to stop it from happening. It's really fascinating to see how people respond to this new pregnancy, and of course it is a woman of color who is the person who is pregnant, and so it really brings in these kind of racial disparities. Again, it's so much about our culture and the way we view reproductive freedoms. So there's a lot in Children of Men that I think is really interesting in terms of how men want to control women and women's reproductive lives. That is really chilling, and I think it has a whole new meaning in this post-Roe world that we're living in. So Children of Men absolutely deserves a rewatch after the Supreme Court's decision. In the number 4 spot, this is something that only I remember, and I wish they had gotten here in time. I actually tracked them down on eBay. This was a young adult series from the 80s. There were only 4 books that were ever published. Fire Bratz by Barbara Siegel. I remember finding these in my library when I was in junior high or high school. And this is from the 80s. So in the 50s, I talked about earlier with On the Beach, that there was kind of this nuclear panic. Well, in the 80s, there was kind of this arms race, and there was a lot of worry about potential nuclear proliferation. And so we started getting, again, these sort of post-apocalyptic nuclear meltdown kind of stories. And Fire Bratz was a young adult series where these 2 kids who don't really know each other and they don't really get along when they first meet, they're going to set up for this event, and all of a sudden these like emergency sirens go on. They're at this theater, and they go down into the basement. For some reason, this theater has this basement that's like floors and floors down, like this sub basement. So they hide down in this like sub basement, and when they come out again, there's been this nuclear blast, and there's all of these like mutant marauders, and the weather is all fucked up. There's like softball-sized hail that comes down at one point, and they're trying to get to Denver. So they're on, I think, the East Coast, and they're trying to get to Denver. Now, there were 4 books in the series, and I read 3 of them because I know our library didn't have one of them. And so I was always like, oh, I was so mad that I was missing that part of the story. And then when you read book 4, I think it gave you like a little preview of future books. They never got published. There were only 4 books ever published in the series. Oh, I'm so mad. But I found them on eBay. Somebody had them for like $200. And on eBay, you can like make an offer. And I sent them a ridiculous lowball offer. I thought they would never take it. And they did. So I have all 4 of the Fire Bratz books coming to me. I am so excited. I cannot wait to read them again. I'm sure it's going to be cheesy. I'm sure there's things about it that like the rose-colored glasses of age and time have really made them seem like they're better than they were. But those had such an impact on me of this could just happen, and then you have to make your way in the world. I've always decided that if there's an apocalypse, I don't think I want to live through it. There is no version of the post-apocalypse that seems at all fun or glamorous or beautiful or that I want to be a part of. So whatever the catastrophe is, I hope I just go out quick because I don't want to live in zombie nuclear meltdown Duke Nukem bullshit. I don't want to do it. I don't want to squeal like a pig. I don't want to. That's Deliverance, which is not. But it's fine. In the number 3 spot, now we're going to veer over into some kind of zombie territory, and that is The Girl with All the Gifts, which again I think is based on a book. I've only ever seen the movie, and the movie is beautiful. It's so good. And basically there's some sort of infection, there's some sort of epidemic that's basically like a zombie plague. I don't remember. I don't think they call them zombies per se, but it basically turns people into ravenous, Walking Dead sort of brain-eating, flesh-eating monsters. And what happens is that then there are these children who are born in this that are kind of half and half. So they seem to have the affliction, but they don't lose their mental faculties. They're still, aware, and they are able to converse, and they're in a school, but they're also tightly controlled because they can give into this blood hunger. And so there's this little girl who seems to have the most control over it, and they're trying to study her, and then there's this breakdown at the facility that they're at, and they all have to kind of flee, and they take her with, and some of the people want to kill her because they think she's a threat, and some people think that she might be an answer to this plague. They think that she could be a cure if they just study her. And then they go out into the world, and they're discovering what's left out there, and there's this band of feral children who were born to mothers who got it while they were giving birth, and they've had to raise themselves. It's this whole crazy shit. It's just bizarre, but so interesting. And it really is this kind of story about evolution and about change. And it wasn't intended to be this way, but the main kind of leader of the military people is Glenn Close, who we love. I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. We love a Norma Desmond Glenn Close moment. We love her. And then there's this little girl, and I forget her name. I'll put it up on the screen. But they didn't intend for the little girl to be black. It wasn't written that way. But when they were casting, she apparently knocked the audition out of the park. And it becomes this interesting way of talking about the change of the sort of racial makeup of the world. And at some point she decides to side with the sort of, I don't even know what to call them. I don't remember if they had a name. The people were sort of starting to evolve into this more half zombie kind of thing. She says it's not over. It's just not yours anymore. And it's so good. And she kind of helps usher in this final bringing down of the humans, the kind of old white woman, Karen person of Glenn Close. And she's saying it's not over. It's not broken. It's not destroyed. It's just not yours anymore. And I think that is so good. And it's such a great, again, this sort of metaphor. I love these metaphors for how humans treat each other and how people with power and privilege will just hold on and try to keep anything from changing at any cost. And people coming in and saying, it's not you anymore. It's not you. I understand that you had power and you're trying to hold on to it, but it's not you, baby. It's not you anymore. It's not about you. It's not your story. It's not your world. It's our time now. And that's so scary for those people. And I think it's a really brilliant kind of story to tell. And the way that they tell it is so beautiful and unexpected and bloody and visceral and just so good. The Girl with All the Gifts. In the number 2 spot, Battlestar Galactica. And I am very explicitly talking about the 2000s reboot. The reboot of Battlestar Galactica is the perfect allegory for post 9/11 America that I have seen. It's so good. The way that wave of Islamophobia that kicked off after 9/11 is so perfectly captured. That reboot, it's so well done. And what I love about that show is that not only is it so timely, and it's so sensitive to all of the characters. Even the bad characters have human qualities and have these moments where you get to see them as a fully realized human being, not as a cardboard cutout bad villain that's there to be knocked down. I love that you get these moments where everybody gets to be human, but the bad people generally still get punished, and the good people still kind of get rewarded, but it's never in the ways that you think, and sometimes the reward is as bad as anything else. It's just really, really interesting. And what I love about it especially, I think at some point I may do a video about toxic fandom. Let me know down in the comments below if you'd like to see a video talking about that, because there are elements of fandoms that I think can be so toxic and so just really ugly and awful. And when this was coming out and they were talking about it and they were starting to reveal things, before it had even launched, they were starting to do little reveals. And they revealed that one of the characters, Starbuck, was going to be a woman. You know, they were changing races and genders and of these like characters. And the nerds were enraged. They were enraged. They were so mad. All of the like hardcore fans of the original series lost their goddamn minds, and they were so mad about it. And there were petitions and message boards and all this kind of shit. And what I love, I read this story in an article about the creators went to, I think it was like one of the big Comic-Cons, maybe even like Los Angeles Comic-Con. And they showed a preview of the show, and there were all of these enraged nerds in the audience. And they watched it, and of course, what they previewed was brilliant, because that show was brilliant. And so they show this preview, and everybody's in awe. And some nerd got up to the microphone and said, well, I mean, that looked kind of good. But if we, the fans, decide that we're going to support this show, are you going to listen to our feedback and incorporate what we want to see as fans of the show and give us what we're entitled to as fans of the show? And I mean, obviously I don't know the exact quote, but basically what they were saying was, we're fans of the original, so if we say, okay, we'll support this, are you gonna, you know, go back on whatever you were planning and give us what we tell you we want? And the creator said no. That's why I love this story, because the creator basically said, no. They said, this is the show we made. This is the show we are going to make. And if you love it and you want to get on board, we would love that for you. We have taken the germ of an idea from this earlier show, and this is what we're making. It's a different story. We're in different times. This is what we're going to make. Either support it or don't. But we don't give a shit. And I have never seen a more direct, in-your-face response to toxic fandom than that. And I thought it was glorious. Because it was perfect. So many, like, chin-beard fanboys just try to ruin everything. Because they just want... They want the same thing over and over again. But they don't want it to be exactly the same, because then that's repetitive and that's redundant. But they don't want it too different, because then that's not what they love and it's not their thing. And so they want this, but they don't want this, and they don't want this, and we can't have this, and we can't change, and we can't adapt to the times, and on and on and on. And it's so toxic and gross, and it just makes it hard to really like anything. And so I love that they were just like, no, we made the show we made. You're going to get on board with it, or don't. That's fine. You don't have to be a fan of our show. Just because you're a fan of the original, if you don't like our show, don't watch it. We hope you will. And we think we're making a great fucking show. And by the way, they did. But you don't have to be part of it. And I love telling people that just because you are a fan of something does not mean you are entitled to anything from those creators, anything from people who are going to reinterpret it. You can like more than one thing. That's why I do so many horror videos where I talk about reboots. Because sometimes I may not think a reboot is quality, but I don't think a reboot just shouldn't exist because it's a reboot. I love to see new interpretations of things. Some I think are more successful than others. I thought the all-female Ghostbusters was better than the original. If you want to hear more about that, check out this video right here. Cue the nerd rage. I love it. So definitely check out the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. And if I went back to it now, I think I would find it even more relevant to this weird conservative swing that we're in now. I think I would resonate with it even more. Yikes. And in the #1 spot, this is the bleakest end-of-the-world post-apocalyptic narrative that I can think of, and that is Cormac McCarthy's The Road. And they did make a movie of it that's got Charlize Theron, who I always love. The movie is good, but the book is even better, and it's so dark. It really is probably the most bleak. I mean, on the beach, everybody in the world is dead. It really is like an extinction event, but everybody's so calm about it. They're just so like, whatever. I guess we all die now. It's fine. Like, they're so polite and mannered about the end of the world. This one is so bleak. And basically, there's been some event. And they don't really say what it is, but there's descriptions that kind of hint at some sort of nuclear blast, fallout, something. But it has kicked up debris and things into the sky. So there's no sunlight, not enough sunlight for plants to grow. So all of the plants have died. It's now like 5 years after the event. Any, like, stores of food have run out for the most part. There isn't really a chance for agriculture because of the sky situation. Plants and trees are dying, so things are slowly going away. And people have just, to survive, they just have started eating each other. And so you have to be afraid of every person that you encounter. Because, yes, banding together can help you survive against other people, but that person might be plotting to just, like, knock you out and kill you and eat you. And so there's different ways that people, like, trap other people so they can eat them. And there's all this kind of... It's so dark. And it's this guy who's trying to get his son. He's got his child with him. And his wife... He's just called man... I think it's man, boy, and woman are this main family. They don't even get names. And right after the blast, when things are getting bad, she just decides she's going to walk off into the night. And we don't know what happened to her. Obviously, she dies. She just was like, this is not kind to keep him alive. She's like, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to, like, make this decision for you. But this world is not going to be kind. And she just disappears. And so he's trying to take care of his child. And he has gotten it into his head that if he can just get to the coast. So he and his son have been, like, making their way to the coast and fighting off marauders and trying to stay out of traps and stay undetected and all this kind of stuff. And it's all about getting to the coast. And at some point they get to the coast and it's just like everywhere else. And the man eventually realizes that he's dying. And there's kind of this end of the book moment where he realizes he encounters these other people. There's like a guy and maybe his wife. And I don't think they have a kid with them, but they have a dog. And the presence of the dog makes him believe that they're okay. Because if they wouldn't kill a dog and eat it, they'll take care of his child. And so he's dying, so he entrusts his child to these people. But he doesn't know. And there's actually an interesting fan theory that I've read online where they say that basically the entire story from this very early scene is actually just a death fantasy. That actually in this earlier scene, he started to die, and that this whole thing has just been him in his mind trying to make a narrative where he believes that his child will be okay. Because he's about to die, and the child is going to be left alone. And with the world around them, you know what that means, that does not bode well for that child. Because there's things throughout the book that don't make sense. So not only do these people at the end have a dog with them, but there's a couple of parts earlier where either he or the child say that they hear a dog. And 5 years into this, it makes no sense that there would be a dog. Because I know we're all lovey-dovey, we all love our pets, they're our fur babies. In that kind of situation where there's no agriculture and no food, it might not be you, but someone's going to eat that dog, bitch. Like, it just does not make sense that people are going to have a pet in this post-apocalyptic world. It does not make sense. So it makes sense in this sort of theory, it's actually very credible, that he's just sort of trying to build up this world where he can die and his child will be safe. And it's so dark and so bleak. And it's just, like, heart-wrenching. It's so heart-wrenching to watch. And so this little boy goes off with this new family and just trusts that they're going to take care of him. It's so dark. It is so good. Cormac McCarthy's The Road is my absolute favorite end-of-the-world narrative ever. So that is my top 10 list, my picks for my favorite end-of-the-world narratives. There are so many that could go on here. I mean, I think the later seasons of The Walking Dead absolutely fall into this. There's some really great sort of wrangling and wrestling with what society becomes in those moments. I think is so good. I love the character of Carol. They do so much with her that's so delicious. I absolutely love it. There's so many choices, but these are my favorites that resonate for me right now. So let me know down in the description box below, what are your favorites? Did you like any of these? Have you seen any of these? Are there any that you're thinking about picking up? Let me know in the comments and let's have a discussion. While you're down there, don't forget that you can give me that thumbs up to tell me you appreciated the video. I really appreciate it when you do that because as a small, tiny little channel, any bump in the algorithm to get some engagement is so helpful. And you know what? If you didn't like my list, if you're like, zombies can't be post-apocalyptic, it's different. Aliens ain't post-apocalyptic, it's different. You know what? You can give me that thumbs down to tell me what backwards, awful, list-making whore I am. Guess what? It's all engagement. The algorithm isn't a picky bitch, and neither am I. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, become part of the Champagne Dreamers, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads. I try really hard to make sure that I have at least one video a week, and sometimes, if you're really lucky, you might even get a bonus video. Ooh, apocalyptastic. If you'd like to chat, banter, or commiserate between uploads, all of my social media will be linked down in the description box below, including a link to my website, The World of Champagne at JanessaJ.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate all of you. I have so much fun making these horror videos. If there's any other topics, any other types of horrors you want to see a top 10 list of, let me know down in the comments below. And until I see you again, bye. And then during the Donald Trump pregnancy, and what had happened was
What happened?
nuclear proliferation. I'll wait till I'm like in a cloud of marshmallow and can just settle in and watch it. But